Hi Year 12. This particular recording is going to be about Anthem for Doomed Youth. I'm going to assume that it's going to go over 2 recordings straight off because we know from previous experience that that's what's going to happen. Okay, so we're dealing with Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. Let's firstly start off by looking at the title. It's ironic, the title. It's also perhaps an oxymoron here, Doomed Youth. But let's start off with the anthem itself. The anthem being a song that, or a piece of music that usually brings a group together. It's triumphant, it's joyful, it's celebratory. And yet for this one, we know from the poem that this is anything but that. So it is used ironically, but it also has this idea that there is a hymnal sense to it for Owen. So like a type of hymn, and we'll go back into it. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. Doomed youth. Doomed. It is a word that means final, frail. It's going to end. Everything's coming to an end. Yet youth is the complete opposite of that. Like, this is the start. It's this moment where you're caught between boyhood and manhood, and that rite of passage, and yet it's doomed. There's a finality that's juxtaposed against it. So that's how it becomes the oxymoron, and we get this idea that there is something just not right, just even from the title. Okay, now let's have a look at the structure of the poem. You'll see we have 2 stanzas. One stanza has 8 lines, the other stanza has 6 lines. So we have an octave and a sestet. So we have 14 lines in total, and we have what is called a Petrarchan sonnet. Petrarch was a poet of, off the top of my head, 1500s Italy, and it was a style of poem that he devised, later to be adopted by Shakespeare, but Shakespeare changed the rhyming scheme. And if we have a look at this rhyming scheme, we've got cattle, guns, rattle, orisons, bells, choirs, shells, shires, all, eyes, goodbyes, Paul, minds, and blinds. So we have a rhyming scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, F, E, G, G, which is the rhyming scheme of the Shakespearean sonnet, which used the Petrarchan sonnet. Now, traditionally, a Petrarchan sonnet is about love, and arguably this poem is anything but about love. And yet, for me, I think the choice of using a Petrarchan sonnet suggests the love that Owen has for the soldiers, as if somehow there is no other love. And we know that he wrote to his mother just after starting the war, where he noted that God existed in no man's land, and that the words of Christ, where he says, "There is no greater love, says the Lord, than to lay down your life for a friend," which is John 12:13. I think we have that coming out in this poem. There is a love here that is amongst these men, these soldiers who are laying down their lives for each other. And when we compare it to the other poems, it becomes more evident. Okay, some other things of note when we go through this, we have minimal pronouns. We have the pronoun here, who, then we've got them, them. Just try to find them all for you. There, that's it. There and them, and they're very they're non-specific. There's nothing about these pronouns that give us any indication of who or what we're talking about. And if you compare that to Dolce Decorum Est, where he's talking about we and I and all and you, and it's a lot more specific, whereas this has like a vagueness to it. Next thing to look at are the two different discourses that we have going through this. We have lexical chains of the military, and we have lexical chains for the church, for the religious symbolism. So in terms of the military, we have guns, stuttering rifles, rapid rattle, the wailing shells, bugles. These are all military terms. Then when we look at it, in terms of the church symbols, we got bells, orisons, bells, prayers, morning, choirs, candles, holy glimmers, colour. And so we have these two opposing lexical chains, if you will, where one language of the church is being forced onto the battlefield, or alternatively, the language of the battlefield is being forced onto the language of the church. But either way, what we have is the language of the church is giving a rich visual imagery to what is happening on the battlefield, and almost looking at it again ironically, because it's not what we had expected. Okay, some other structural things of note is the limitation or the limit in verbs in the poem. We have the gerund pass in, die, patter, arguably, actually not even prayers, mourning, to mourn, to wail, and to call. And that's it. Down here, held, shine. Okay, and that's it. I might have missed some because I'm doing this pretty quickly. I might have missed some, but it's very limited in the number of verbs. As a result, when we're thinking of an anthem, a hymn at a funeral, we're thinking eulogy, and yet this becomes an elegy. And the lack of verbs they've given away verbs to more adjectives and descriptive language, sort of drags the whole thing out, and so it becomes that elegy, sorry, I don't even know how to pronounce that one tonight, in its structural form, showing that Owen is letting this lament linger. The other thing that goes with that is the fact that it's written in the present tense. And so not only is this lament being drawn out, and the elegy is a lament for the dead, where we draw out that mourning process and that grief, we have in the structure, the way he's doing it, is that by putting it in present tense, we also get this idea that it just goes on, and it's repetitive in nature. Notice also that the octave starts with an interrogatory, and so does the sestet. They both start with that rhetorical question, that interrogatory, which then gets answered. So what I'm going to do is stop this here and do this one just on some of those structural elements. A couple of other things to note is the use of the hyphen there and there, where it's that, like, this hyphen suggests that this is a continuation on from this sentence here, and likewise this hyphen here makes it that this is a continuation from here as well. So I'm going to stop it there and then go on and looking at the actual figurative language within the poem.